Most heroic things in life happen because of emotions, because they involve so much difficulty, sacrifice, hardships, obstacles, that one will not pick up the courage to do it.
When I visited Mirambika first time, I saw those big windows, like no walls, so that they have the liberty to really like jump out of the classroom if they're not liking it or not feeling good about it.
But if we expect that 20 minutes of meditation a day will compensate for the tension and turmoil of the remaining 24 hours, it is asking for too much from too little.
Without buying those stuff for which I have the desire, how do I reach that level of really that peace that I don't need them?
What tells us that the child actually knew that I'm doing something wrong? The child tries to hide it.
Yeah.
Which means that the child knows what is right and wrong. The children don't have to be told what is right and wrong.
Mothers International School and Mirambika School, they follow Aurobindo's philosophy and integral education. How is that education and how those schools are different from mainstreams?
Somebody else's Swadharma is better than mine. It's better to live my own Swadharma.
Welcome to Mind Mingle Podcast, sir. And I'm really happy to see you again. It's been like many years, almost a decade when we first connected. And now we are here at the Mind Mingle Podcast with you. And I'm so happy. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
So, start करते हैं थोड़ा सा beginning से. So, I know that you have been with AIIMS. You've been a researcher, teacher at AIIMS, and you have seen a highly successful career. क्या ऐसा हुआ कि जो ये shift आया, जैसे now you are so much connected with spirituality and spiritual teaching, and you connected with Aurobindo Ashram. So was there any defining moment in your life which led to this, or it was just like that?
In a way, it was not an abrupt development. In a way, there was a turning point. Both are true. It was not an abrupt development because since childhood I had been inclined towards religion and spirituality. And then, in my research career, my research was on nutrition in relation to cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And that field itself was expanding to include lifestyle as a whole, which included yoga as one of the examples of the finest lifestyles ever discovered. So in that sense, professionally, there was a continuity. But then the turning point was in 1992, when I was going through a difficult phase in life. And in a Sunday newspaper, I read in the daily events column that there was a satsang at Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. So I thought, let me go there and I may get some peace of mind. And that's how I went there for the satsang. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that I really liked the place because they said 10 o'clock, they started at 10. They were very punctual. So I was very pleasantly surprised. There were no rituals, no ceremonies, and it was spirituality that was being talked about, not religion. And I discovered that the satsang was there every Sunday. Then I started reading books, and that's how I discovered what yoga was truly about. And that led to a convergence of my personal and professional life, because from nutrition, now I could see how I could expand to lifestyle as a whole, because nutrition is only one of the several lifestyle factors which are important in relation to chronic disease. So my field of research expanded to include yoga, and now it was only after going to the ashram there that I understood how yoga could be a lifestyle and a stress buster. So that led to a convergence of my personal and professional life. Then it led to the establishment of an integral health clinic at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, where we started offering lifestyle modification courses based on yoga for prevention and management of chronic disease. That happened in the year 2000. So when that happened, I realized that that place, that clinic would have a momentum of its own anyway. So why should I go on spending more time at AIIMS, spending time on committee meetings and administration? Why not quit? So that's how I ended up taking early retirement in the year 2005, so that I could get more time for dissemination of ancient Indian wisdom, particularly in the light of the teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and also for writing, which I was passionate about. So that's what I have been doing after taking early retirement. I moved to the ashram in 2006 and have never looked back. When I have a lovely audience available, I speak, otherwise I write.
अब कितना टाइम बचा था रिटायरमेंट में आपका, कितना लाइक सर्विस का एम्स में? Was it like
मैं 7 साल और कर सकता था कंटिन्यू.
Okay, so 7 years before you took the. Okay, एक बहुत बेसिक क्वेश्चन है, मतलब सभी मतलब ये पूछते हैं आई गेस कि, और बहुत कॉमन है मेरे लिए भी, और आई गेस मैं चाहूँगा कि ओके आई विल ऑल्सो लाइक टू मेंशन कि मैं कुछ हम लेंगे ऐसे क्वेश्चन जो बहुत बेसिक हैं, और सो दैट द ऑडियंस अंडरस्टैंड्स द बेसिक ऑफ स्पिरिचुअलिटी. तो सबसे पहले तो ये कि स्पिरिचुअलिटी को अगर हम एक्सप्लेन करें बहुत सिंपल शब्दों में, लेट्स से यू आर एक्सप्लेनिंग स्पिरिचुअलिटी टू अ 5-year-old, सो और छोटे कुछ शब्दों में, तो क्या निचोड़ निकलेगा उसका, क्या स्पिरिचुअलिटी क्या है. एंड ऑल्सो द सेकेंड क्वेश्चन वुड बी रिलेटेड टू दैट. यू सेड यू हैव बीन वेरी रिलीजियस फ्रॉम द बिगनिंग, राइट, इन योर लाइफ. सो रिलीजन एंड स्पिरिचुअलिटी का कोई कनेक्शन है और या नहीं है? अगर नहीं है तो क्यों, कैसे नहीं है, और अगर है तो वो कैसे है? Two questions.
I would not really venture to talk about spirituality to a 3-year-old. In a way, a 3-year-old is spontaneously spiritual because their life has not yet been complicated by many external influences, so they are very open to the divine. The second question I think is important, the difference between religion and spirituality, because they are quite often mixed up. Every religion has a spiritual philosophy underlying it. And when it comes to that, the differences between religions are minimal, and whatever differences are there, they are not irreconcilable. The differences come in because of the other aspects of religion, which are the ethical code, which can differ from one religion to the other to some extent, but even there the differences are relatively less. What distinguishes one religion from the other is more than this, the rituals and ceremonies, the myths and legends associated with the religion. So if we stick to the basic underlying philosophy which underlies every religion, then the differences would be minimal, and essentially it boils down to 3 basic things which unite all religions when it comes to spiritual philosophy. Firstly, that the world is not an accident, it was the result of an intelligent design by a creator. So there is a creator. Secondly, that the creator, having created the creation, has also a presence, a subtle presence throughout its creation. So it has an all-pervasive presence in its creation, and that is what we call the spirit, and that is where the word spirituality comes from. And thirdly, having created this creation, the creator has not abandoned us, it continues to play a role in running it. So that is what essentially spirituality is about. And if we organize our life around these deeper truths of existence, our life undergoes a change, and that is what spiritual life is about.
Nice. Now this answer kind of confuses me, because recently I have studied and about spirituality, and someone wrote and said that spirituality is not related to spirit. So when you translate that to Sanskrit, it is adhyatma. So it's like adhyan of self, like know thyself. So it's mainly about like my own discovery of my own self. So like self-awareness. Then Deepak Chopra also I was hearing, and then he like concluded in just one sentence. He said spirituality is just self-awareness. So how is it like? Maybe I misunderstood it, or would you like to say something about it?
Well, partly this confusion arises because there are some words in the Sanskrit language for which there is no exact equivalent
Translation.
in English language. So that is why that confusion arises. But the fact that the divine has an all-pervasive presence in its creation, that is something which all spiritual philosophies accept, whether we call it the spirit or by any other name. That would be that would not make any difference to that presence. And when you say Deepak Chopra says self-awareness, now self itself, could be spelled with a small s or a capital S. So when we say spirituality is about self-awareness, it is the capital S, which means that our own divine essence, the divine within us, being aware of that.
Yes.
And that awareness should further translate into organizing our life around that awareness. And it would be spiritual practice.
Okay. And then related to again this, your answer, another question comes. आपने कहा कि there is a creator. If the universe is designed, because we see the design, right? It's so beautifully done and everything is just almost perfect. And since we are a living being, so if we talk about the earth only, so everything is designed to sustain this life. That's why we exist. If there was something else, probably the life would have been something else. Now another like guru that I have been studying is Osho, and Osho says कि हम creator तक क्यों जाते हैं? if there is a God, because you're thinking ki, if there is no God, who has designed it? So how that discovery ends at God? Then somebody must have designed God also.
Well, that is one question which we don't get into because theoretically or rationally, only nothing can arise out of nothing. So if something exists, it must have arisen out of something. And if we keep going back, there will be an original source from which everything came. And how that original source came, that is something which we really cannot get into, because there's neither any rational way of doing it nor any...
Yeah, that's exactly what he says. He says, like, if God can arise from nothing, then why can't universe in itself? If something has to arise from nothing, then why can't that be universe itself? So वो एक बड़ा interesting मुझे लगता है उनका एक argument.
Well, that is argument, no? But neither the existence of God nor the absence of God can be proved by rational analysis.
I get it. जी. So let's talk about a little bit education. You've been associated with ashram.
Yeah, that is what Mind Mingle is essentially.
Yes. Yeah. So and Naveen and I have been also talking about क्या spirituality बच्चों को पढ़ाई जा सकती है, क्या स्कूल में introduce करना चाहिए. So I want to discuss with you that also. So before that, but I would like to talk about Mothers International School and Mirambika School. They follow Aurobindo's philosophy and integral education. How is that education and how those schools are different from mainstream schools? So क्या major differences हैं जो हमारी audience को जानना चाहिए?
Well, these schools or any other schools that have been inspired by Sri Aurobindo and the mother. The first one was established at Pondicherry in 1943. So these schools are amongst the best in the world. And the way they have earned that name is because of not only being holistic in nature, but apart from that, having a value encouraging, enhancing system. Now, when I say value enhancing, I'm just trying to be sort of very cautious in using the words, because we don't have value education in the usual sense of the word. We don't tell the children what to do, what not to do. We don't give them a set of values. We don't have a separate period for value or moral education, and there's no exam on moral education. None of these things happens. What we try to do in this system, which distinguishes it from all other similar systems, is that the emphasis is on the inner monitor, the inner guide which each one of us has. And the child is quite conscious of it and can be made more aware of it. Not only be made more aware of the fact that the child has an inner guide to decide what is right and wrong, but also paying heed to that voice from within has consequences. If you listen to that voice, you get immense joy and lasting mental peace. And if one ignores that voice, violates it, then one gets a sense of guilt and recurrent uneasiness. Now, why this is important to understand, and the child knows that the guide is there, but yet the child violates it quite often. Why? Because evil can be tempting. And it's tempting for children, it's tempting for adults. You don't have to elaborate on that. So for the child also it's tempting, it gives a short-term thrill, a short-term pleasure. And what tells us that the child actually knew that I'm doing something wrong? The child tries to hide it. Which means that the child knows what is right and wrong. The children don't have to be told what is right and wrong. So giving them morals and values is of no use. They already know it. What is important is to make them aware that paying heed to that voice from within or ignoring it has consequences. Because the child can feel that also. And that has to be brought out through appropriate questions, stories, reflections in the classroom. So the teacher has to be aware of this, that this is something which has to be driven home all the time, and exploit, make use of every opportunity that she gets in the classroom setting, and have specific learning material designed, which maybe in the form of stories, and that stories has to be told in a way that it encourages the children to reflect. They internalize the message without any sermonizing. So that is what is important. And that can happen anytime depending upon the situation in the classroom.
You said the child tries to hide if he does something like wrong. So does it come naturally, or it is child's observation that he must have done something wrong previously, let's say first time, and somebody must have seen and scolded him. So now he knows that this kind of stuff is not accepted. by adults. So is it like that, or does it like really come naturally? Like, what do you
To
think?
quite some extent, it's innate. It comes from within. The only thing is that the child gets tempted, the way the adults also do. And this has important repercussions on the society as a whole later on, because much of crime actually thrives on exactly this mentality that I have to avoid doing something wrong because I might be punished by somebody else. Punishment would come from outside. So any criminal who commits a crime is careful and knows that I am doing it so carefully that nobody will ever find out. So I'll not get punished. And if I'll not get punished, it doesn't matter. But what the person does not realize is that one can escape punishment from the police or the courts, but there's a punishment that comes from within, which nobody can escape. That is what we have to make the child aware of.
Right. And Aurobindo talks about, like Aurobindo has written principles of true teaching. And one of them is, the first is like very famous, nothing can be taught. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on that, like, because school is a place where it is a teaching place, right? So everybody send their children so that they can be taught in a right way. And when somebody says nothing can be taught, and so some people may not understand it in that way. So how would you elaborate it for local people to understand what does this mean? Not teaching.
Yes, the first principle that nothing can be taught can be easily misinterpreted. If we take it literally, then all schools and colleges become completely useless.
Yeah.
What actually Sri Aurobindo meant was that it is not the teacher who teaches, it is the student who learns. Which means that you cannot teach anything unless the student is willing to learn, unless the student wants to learn. And it's so obvious because the teacher teaches exactly the same thing. Some students learn a lot from it, and at the other extreme, some students learned hardly anything from it. So it's not the teacher who has been able to teach.
Beautiful. Yes.
These students whose active participation in the process, the teaching learning process as it is called now, which determines how much they will learn.
Otherwise, everybody would be on the same pace because teacher is teaching in the same style to everybody. Yeah, but since they are not, which means it's more important how they are learning instead of how she is teaching.
So more important is to develop in the child the love for learning.
Yes. So that child can discover ways to really learn. A learner can do anything. I read somewhere, it was like very powerful quote, that learner can do anything because he learn and do anything. Okay. According to you, like what all major problems you see in traditional schools? You have seen both traditional and alternative schools in your life. And what do you think the mainstream schools are majorly missing? And whatever they're missing, and what are the problems that you see in education system because of that?
Actually, the outcome in school education depends primarily on the teachers and the system of education in that order. Because so far as the children are concerned in school, there will be a wide spectrum. And every child is entitled to school education, according to the mother, at least up to the age of 14, which means at the age of 14, every child should learn a bit of everything. So within that, there will be a wide spectrum. Some will be very interested, some will not be so interested in academics. But then the system should be such that it has a holistic approach. It encourages the development of all the instruments, that is the body, the physical, the emotional part of the being, the vital, and the intellect or the mental part of the being. It should encourage that. And it should be, and not only these parts should develop, the child should also simultaneously pick up that these instruments have to be put to good use. That is what psychic education is about in integral education. That is, the reference point is the divine essence within. And the child should get into the habit. It should become spontaneous for the child to use these instruments which have been developed through the system of education, the physical, vital, and the mental. The child should learn to use these more and more in light of the divine essence within, which means put them to good use. So that is the essential thing. But that actually does not happen to that extent in the mainstream schools, and to some extent even in the best of schools, because they also have some constraints determined by the society, some determined by the boards of education, and so on. So the result is that the ideal becomes difficult to practice. But where the mainstream schools lack probably the most is that leave aside enhancing values through psychic education, even the education of the physical, emotional part of the being and the mental is faulty. The physical is more or less neglected. Every time there is a pressure on time, the first thing to go would be the physical education, which means its values is not realized to that extent. Secondly, it's looked upon mainly as games and sports, and only those who excel may get to participate in matches, which brings the school a good name. But everybody may not be good at competitive sports. What is important is that every child should be physically fit, and not only physically fit, the movements should become more and more graceful, harmonious, well coordinated, and conscious. That's all a part of physical education. That doesn't happen. When it comes to emotional part of the being, the tools in teaching that we have for emotional part of the for educating the emotional part of the being are things like art, music, dance, theater, and so on. Now, these are considered extracurricular. In fact, they are not extracurricular, they are strictly curricular. And they don't get the importance that they deserve. So, why they are strictly curricular is because it is through these that the child picks up, internalizes a very profound message, and that is, my feeling good or bad does not depend upon something which is concrete, rational, material, or palpable. It can come from things which have absolutely no utility otherwise. Because these things have no utility. We are speaking, we are able to communicate. Why do I have to take all the trouble of composing lyrics out of it and then giving it the shape of music? Looks like a waste of time. Yet, it makes us feel so good.
Yes.
So one can feel good through things which may have otherwise no utility.
Yeah.
So that is the profound message the child is deriving. And that is important because by and large, we are driven more by emotions than by reason in life.
Absolutely.
But then the emotions are a double-edged tool. They can be used for good and for bad. The most heroic things in life happen because of emotions, because they involve so much difficulty, sacrifice, hardships, obstacles, that one will not pick up the courage to do it unless one is passionate about it, one is emotionally involved. जुनून जिसको बोलते हैं, जुनून ना हो तो नहीं करेंगे.
जी जी.
तो इन सब मुश्किलात का जो है सामना करने के लिए इसलिए इंसान तैयार हो जाता है क्योंकि वो उसको जुनून है एक. So emotions are behind everything great and worthwhile that happens in the world. But emotions are also behind the worst of crimes that happen in the world.
Correct.
So emotions don't have to be killed. They have to be in fact nurtured, educated,
channelized,
purified, and refined.
Yeah.
The emotions should also be used in light of that divine essence within. So that emotional development is taking place through things like drama, dance, art, music, and the content and the way it is given should be such that it should encourage their going in the right direction, that is towards purification of the emotions, not towards their becoming crude and vulgar. So that is what the difference comes in. So that is why these subjects are strictly curricular. That is where the child develops a proper taste for these things. Not only develops the ability for these, but also develops the right taste. So that's why this is important. This is neglected. Then when it comes to the intellect, well, that we said it is an acceptable part of education. One thinks that as if that is the main thing in education. But then there again we do a very poor job. Because the instrument that we develop the most is memory. That is where the focus is on. That is the lowest faculty of learning.
Memory.
Yes. How about going beyond that? Understanding, application, summarizing, elaborating, creative thinking, original thinking, logical thinking. Now, these are things which we make no effort to develop. And somehow we seem to be very good at beating the system also, because I heard that now there are questions on higher ability learning.
Yeah.
Now, very good. But then to make good questions which test higher abilities is firstly difficult. And therefore, I'm sure this question bank is limited. And there are books available which give the previous questions, questions that have been asked to test higher ability learning. And what the students are doing is to get hold of these guides and books where these questions are available, and memorize the answers. So without developing the higher abilities, they know the answers to the higher ability learning questions through memory. So once again, what is being used, what is being developed is memory, not the higher abilities of learning.
Interesting. I want to talk more about the physical education. When you talked about physical education, there comes competitiveness. So we have also been working closely with Jiddu Krishnamurti schools. I'm not sure about Sri Aurobindo's schools, but I know about Jiddu Krishnamurti schools that they do not encourage competition at all. And how does this work here at Shri Aurobindo's schools? Do you encourage competition? If not, or yes, then I ask more questions around it.
Well, I mean, competition is not encouraged, but excellence is. Because one should do one's best. Doing one's best brings its own satisfaction.
Okay. So competition is not encouraged, but excellence. So you do good looking at yourself, not looking at others. Yeah. So, okay, that answers actually the next question itself.
In fact, project-based learning, which is one of the major tools of teaching, particularly in Mirambika, does just the opposite. It teaches cooperation rather than competition. Because that is where a group works as a whole on a common project, and each one contributes according to his own abilities, passions, inclinations, and temperament, because each child is different. So that child can make the best contribution to the project in one particular area of the project. So together they are able to work in such a way that each child's best qualities, the talents are best used, and at the same time the weaknesses of the child don't matter, because they'll be compensated by some other child doing what that child is good at.
Yeah. Okay. Now I want to also talk to you about the mental health. So when we talk about mental health, stress, and so it is usually referred in corporate world because workload, stress, life, but same happens in schools also. And when we talk about mainstream schools, again, the competition, exam, marks. So both the teachers and students are in stress. And so much because they have to compete, they have to get 90% marks. And also the parents at the same time, because I see parents worried about how to really help their children to get good marks. So how do you see this problem? And I have seen Mirambika and I have seen Ashram School also in Pondicherry, and I see people like so relaxed. And children are like happy and they're free. In fact, when I visited Mirambika first time, I saw those big windows, like no walls, so that they have the liberty to really like jump out of the classroom if they're not liking it or not feeling good about it. So they're that free. And Mirambika, I guess it's Mirambika Free Progressive School, right? So that free also.
Free Progress.
Yeah, Free Progress School. So that environment is very much visible there, but at the other end everybody knows how much stress is there in the school education or everywhere. So how like difficult it is for the teacher, and how they can cope up if they're teaching in mainstream school. What students can do, what parents can do, how teachers can like really relieve themselves from this.
It's difficult to say where to begin in this area, because everybody is contributing to it in one way or the other, and collaborating with each other, collaborating with one another, and the victim is the poor child. The parents want the child to not only do well in the exam, but also have a particular type of career, which according to them is the best career option. The boards of education, they talk about the curriculum being heavy, but not much really happens on the ground in reducing the workload when it comes to the heaviness of the curriculum. And the schools, naturally, they want to show good results in the board exams, and therefore they have to meet the requirements of the board. If the curriculum is heavy, that heavy curriculum has to be completed. If the assessment system is testing rote memory and is not making learning fun at all, still that has to be catered to for good results in the exams. And if the society, instead of having that ancient ideal of a simple living and high thinking, has started believing in high living and simple thinking, You can't do anything about it. No, high living and simple thinking means the simple thinking is that the goal of life is to be happy. Happiness comes from material goods. To get that material comforts, we need money, and therefore indirectly happiness comes from money, and therefore the aim should be to work for a career which will give maximum money for minimum work, and which, if carries along with it some prestige value, so much the better. Now, if this is simple thinking, now the fact that this type of thinking, even one who succeeds in along these lines is not happy, is something which we don't notice. For example, say the people who get into one of the most wanted careers, like say in the management sector, before the child is the person is not a child anymore, is 25, he may be getting a package of 2 lakhs, more than 2 lakhs a month. It's quite possible these days, perhaps. So he's getting that. So his dreams have been in a way fulfilled. He has the money to buy all the material comforts in the world and get happiness out of it. The fact that within 10 years he is frustrated, disappointed, goes through a burnout and starts wondering what life is about is something which nobody thinks about, because that fat pay package did not bring him the expected happiness. But still the society continues to indulge in that simple thinking that high living will somehow bring happiness, and that happiness is that goal of life.
But isn't it like very difficult, because somebody who has not seen wealth, not seen money, and without seeing it and achieving it and not really fulfilling that desire, because desire is always there, right? So desire is there to probably buy new stuff. And without buying those stuff for which I have the desire, how do I reach that level of really that peace that I don't need them? So isn't it a circle that one has to really go through it, or can you surpass it and not go that path? Is that possible?
Shakeel, you're absolutely right. One has to have personal experience before knowledge is verified. So theoretical knowledge that money will not bring lasting happiness is not enough. One should have some money, fulfill some desires, and then see this knowledge which the person had getting verified by personal experience. Which means that the school system should also be geared to providing this knowledge to the child. Which means that the knowledge has to be there. Let the child verify it through personal experience. Then the child will not will find it easy to verify this knowledge.
Correct. Otherwise, he'll be struggling. Yes. He'll say, like, I've got everything and it's still not happy. Yeah.
Because if this background knowledge is not there, the person may feel, well, this did not bring me lasting happiness, maybe fulfillment of the next desire will. History keeps repeating itself, but he can't understand why it is not bringing him lasting happiness. So instead of learning through a very long, tedious process of personal, repeated, bitter experiences, it's better that the child at least has that background knowledge.
Yeah, correct.
That still is important.
That's very nice. Yeah.
Because then, because otherwise there's no end to desires. Desires have a way of multiplying endlessly and getting bigger and more expensive as time goes on.
Yes.
So it's better to have this background knowledge, verify it through personal experience, that knowledge plus experience translates into wisdom, and then the frequency of future desires will go down, and whatever desires are there, the intensity will be low, because the person knows that I know even if I fulfill it, it will not give me lasting happiness. So the person already knows it. So the intensity goes down and the number of desires will also go down.
That's exactly where the value education comes, right? Because if the whole focus is on just making money and then getting better job and get a better pay, so of course they will achieve it because the focus is that. But then the problem will be later on when they're like seeking peace. So if it is simultaneously, let's say they also achieve whatever they want to buy, but they know that this is not the primary or the only goal in life. The goal is to stay happy, be good stuff and peaceful inside. So probably it will be balanced out, right? This is what you've said, right?
And that happiness will come not from outside but from within. Which means that all these desires which one is satisfying by getting things from outside are giving a certain type of happiness. But this happiness does not feel as good as the joy one gets by giving, by sharing, by expressing love. So this is what... this is the other type of happiness that the child has to experience. And that's what I was talking about, about the inner guide. When the child listens to that inner guide gives choices which are driven by love. They involve giving. And the joy of giving always feels better than the happiness of getting
Yes.
something.
Yeah. I was reading Dalai Lama's book, I guess, Book of Happiness, and this joy of giving. He said the joy is giving is why it is like so beautiful, because you can only give out of sense of having something, right? So if you don't have something, if you don't have enough, you can't really be giving, right? So giving comes with the sense of having enough. So that was like very beautiful to read and understand. So let's talk a little about meditation. So meditation, just like spirituality, is heard a lot, but very few understand, and fewer really practice it in a true manner. And it is also a very misunderstood concept, because some people say meditation is this, some people say meditation is that, and some people say it can be different to different people. So for somebody, meditation can be just playing guitar. So what is like really meditation, and how does like people can really understand it and inculcate it in the life?
I think you said something very important, that the meditation can be different things to different people, and even different things to the same person at different times. Well, it's essentially a state of total absorption. Total absorption in something to the exclusion of other things, which means that there's no clutter in the mind. The normal state of the mind is chaotic. To be cluttered is considered normal for the mind. So in that sense, it is an abnormal state of mind. But then all of us have experienced it. If we are intensely interested in something, we get so absorbed in it that we forget everything else. That in a way is a meditation. So for a person playing guitar with that absorption, that is his meditation. And doing any other type of work the same way is also meditation. Now coming to it in a little more sort of way it is normally looked at, it's normally looked at as a technique. And two different ways: a technique for stress reduction or a technique for self-realization, that is realizing the deeper truths of existence. And in both these cases, there is a little, you can say, mistake in the sense that meditation is overrated. When it comes to stress reduction, which is the current way of, common way of looking at meditation as a technique for stress reduction, it can help. But if we expect that 20 minutes of meditation a day will compensate for the tension and turmoil of the remaining 24 hours, it is asking for too much from too little. Meditation will not do it. Because what will actually take stress away is a change in our attitude to the events and circumstances of life. Looking at them positively, seeing something positive in them. And from a spiritual point of view, there's always something positive in everything, even when rationally it's not possible to see anything positive. Because everything in life, including the most unpleasant and traumatic events, have in them the seed for our spiritual growth, which is the very purpose of life. So that is positive thinking, unlimited, without any limits. The fact that everything is an opportunity for spiritual growth is a very potent, infallible prescription, and a prescription which is not just to make us feel good, a prescription based on the deepest truths of existence. So if one changes one's attitude to events and circumstances of life in light of that type of an attitude to life, in terms of being able to see an opportunity for spiritual growth in everything, then meditation can facilitate that process. Because applying this will not be very easy in practice. So meditation gives us that quiet time when one can introspect. I knew this, but could I practice it? Where did I falter? Why did I falter? In a similar situation, how will I behave next time? Now that inner churning can happen during meditation, then meditation would be useful. But if we want to live the rest of our life and our attitude to life completely unaltered and expect that somehow these 20 minutes will do the miracle and take all stress away, that will not happen. The second thing is that it is a technique for self-realization, self with a capital S, which means realizing the deepest truths of existence. For making those
when you
truths
say
real
capital
to us.
S, so you talk about spiritual self.
Yes, the spiritual self, the deepest self, which is our divine essence. We will become aware of that through meditation. Again, that is, meditation is overrated there. It is neither necessary nor sufficient for self-realization. It is not necessary because one can become aware of it without going through a formal technique of meditation. The important thing is being totally absorbed and concentrated.
Beautiful.
Not following a particular technique. And it is not sufficient because just concentrating in it, through you following even the best technique of meditation will not make us see the divine. If otherwise we are not trying to bring spirituality at least to a limited extent in our lives. Limited in the sense that the beginning will always be limited. It's not a one-time event. After the spiritual awakening, when a person starts making a conscious effort, a person might have made many efforts without being conscious of it even before that. For example, a person doing his job sincerely and with full dedication. He's also practicing spirituality to a limited extent, but then he's not doing it consciously. He just thinks that this is a good thing to do. When he becomes more conscious that this is also a spiritual thing to do, then the same thing he does, but in a little different way. Now he does his job, but he's not proud that I'm doing it very sincerely. He's not arrogant about it. He knows I'm doing it as an instrument of the divine. I'm able to do it because I have been given the right talents and opportunities and background and education which makes it possible. So that's why I'm able to do it. And I'm privileged that I have been chosen as the instrument to do it because the divine has no shortage of instruments. Now he's doing the same job, the same sincerity, but in a different way. Now he's doing it consciously in spiritual terms. So when a person gets that spiritual awakening and starts bringing spirituality into his everyday life, then meditation can again facilitate by giving that opportunity for that inner churning, where the person can further refine this process. He'll become gradually more and more sensitive to what he is doing. What earlier he could pass off as normal, now he starts becoming, no, even this was not right. So he becomes more sensitive to it. But then he doesn't go on a guilt trip because of realizing that this is something which I did which was not really truly right. He doesn't go on a guilt trip. He resolves that next time in a similar situation, what I will do, resolves to do it. So it gives him that chance of further refining the process of spiritual development. So meditation can do that. But then for that, it is neither necessary nor sufficient. All the same, it is a good facilitator, and one can give it the type of form which one likes. There are techniques, but then essentially they all boil down to reducing the clutter of the mind, because clarity can emerge only when the clutter has been cleared. You can look at the lines at the bottom of a swimming pool only when the pool is quiet. So that is essentially what one does.
Would you like to share any of your personal experience? When did you start meditating? And also you talked about seeing the divine, experiencing the divine. What is that? And have you experienced the divine, and how was that experience? What really happens when you feel awakened? So what really happens? Like what changes in life?
Well, there are reasons why one does not talk about these things in personal terms. There are good spiritual reasons and injunctions against talking about it. But I may just say that I have been a regular meditator only for about 2 years in my life. And that was in Nepal from 1994 to 96. That was the beginning of my spiritual journey in a conscious way. I went to Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch for the first time in 1992. And then as if by divine design, I was given that period of relative isolation from 1994 to 96 in Nepal, where I went on deputation, where the government of India had set up a new medical school. So I went there without the family. That gave me 2 years of relative isolation, and it was only during that period that I was a regular meditator. But otherwise, by and large, I'm the type of person who treats work as his meditation rather than indulge in the formal technique.
Nice. So you have written a book called What is Spiritual About Being Punctual? So the title itself sounds very interesting. So I want to talk a little about this book. What do you try to convey through this book? And what do you mean by saying what is spiritual about being punctual? Is it small practices, daily practices that puts you in a spiritual state, or what does it mean?
The title, What is Spiritual About Being Punctual, you said is interesting. It's not only interesting, it's catchy as well. So that's why the book is selling quite well. But the book is not about punctuality. Punctuality is only one of the 36 topics dealt with in that book. The book has 36 short essays on different topics which people normally do not associate with spirituality. Punctuality happens to be one of those topics. And if we start with punctuality itself, one may say, well, it's nice to be punctual, but then what is spiritual about it? But there can be a spiritual value, because if you are going for an event where the event can't begin unless you are there, then if you are late, then you're wasting everybody else's time.
Absolutely.
To ignore other people's convenience is itself unspiritual, because if we are all one, then that oneness has to be given an expression by being considerate towards others. So, but then there are so many other things which we do not associate with spirituality, but actually are. And to take some of the common things, like say money. Now, money, we have some moral and ethical codes associated with money, but we don't always look upon money as something which has been given to us, and therefore we not being the owners of the money, but being trustees. Now, that is a spiritual way of looking at money. Or say parenting. Well, if I have become a parent, then the child is my responsibility. We look upon it as a responsibility. We don't look upon it as an opportunity, because the goal of life is spiritual growth, and for growing spiritually, the best tool is extending our love to somebody, and love has to be given an expression, and love is given an expression by giving what we have to those who need it. And now here is an inbuilt opportunity in parenting. The parent has the physical, financial resources as well as the capacity to give love, and all these the child needs. So there's an inbuilt complementary situation where the parent can express love to the child by giving exactly what the child needs. And therefore the parent is growing spiritually through the process. So the parent is not helping the child out of a sense of responsibility. The child is helping the parent by fulfilling the purpose of his or her life. And it comes very easy because love for the child is instinctive. So it's an easy way of doing it. And if the person does it for 20 or 30 years for the child, one becomes an expert in loving and giving. And most parents realize that at the end of these 20, 30 years, they are changed persons. And the purpose of life has been fulfilled through it. But at the same time, the purpose of life continues even till the last breath. It doesn't end with parenting, because eventually the children will become independent. They'll have their own life, and they don't need the parents anymore. But that doesn't mean that the parents' journey is over, spiritual journey is over. The parents have become now experts in loving. They can use that expertise to shower love and affection, express it by giving what they have, who need it, among those who are not related to them by blood or marriage. Because that opportunity is still always there in life. So now they just have to use this expertise in a more difficult situation, because doing it for a biological child is easy. Doing it for others is a little more difficult. So after having done easy things, now they can start doing more difficult things. Of course, it doesn't have to come necessarily in that sequence, but just trying to simplify that the process can still continue. So the children not only helped the parent grow spiritually and fulfill the purpose of life while they were parenting the child, the child also gave the training in loving and fulfilling the purpose of life to the parent the easy way, because it was very easy for it, so that they could graduate to a more difficult level when the child doesn't need them anymore. And the child not needing them, that is also nature has built into the program, because there comes a time around teenage when the children start behaving in a way that the parent also start wondering what has happened to this child.
I was coming to that point.
What has happened to this child? Why is this child rebelling? Why is this child doesn't listen to me? Now the parents start getting frustrated. Where did I go wrong? Now that is important for both the parent and the child, because that is how the parent can develop some sense of detachment from the child and then be ready for the next stage when the love has to be extended to those who are not related to by blood or marriage. And for the child also it's important, because the child has to grow into an independent individual. That independence and freedom will come only through this rebellion.
That comes naturally.
So for the child also it's important. For both it is important to go through that phase of teenage rebellion. It helps the parent, it helps the child, it helps the child become a distinct individual in his or her own right, and it helps the parent get a little sense of detachment from the child, which will help when the love has to spread more thinly on others who may not be related by blood or marriage. So now this gives an entirely different way of looking at parenting.
Yes.
So in this way there are many other topics in it. Marriage gossip, even gossip. There's a essay on gossip. I'm forgetting which all are there, but even on army, war.
Interesting. I like this.
36 essays.
The idea that you explained how nature actually teaches you. So naturally that happens. The child's tantrums start when the child is in teenage, and they both go through that phase because they are the nature is preparing them for further detachment. But it is very difficult. Again, this you've been able to say it because probably you have that understanding already. But for parents, it becomes very difficult. And I was talking about that love is also perishable. So, and you get so detached maybe, and you see family getting broken, expectations are not fulfilled, and then love probably maybe does not really die, but slows down a much, right? So that also happens in cases where people are not aware, right? So maybe what is the solution? So how do they get to this realization? What can be the solution? Because understanding it is difficult.
Love is something, you see, which has many rungs or levels. The lowest rung of love is love which is based on getting rather than giving. That's also a fact. When a young boy and girl fall in love with each other, and they think that they are in love, but actually their attention is focused on how much happiness I can get from the other person. In fact, it's because they get a lot of happiness from the other person that they feel that I'm in love with this person. And if both of them are in love with each other, then it does not really become apparent. But if one of them is, the other one is not interested, then it shows up. Because then this person who claims that I'm in love with her, and she's not, she's rejecting him, he starts making more efforts to persuade her, to woo her, to impress her. He does all that because he gets a lot of happiness in her company. If still she does not listen, then he starts getting angry. Why don't you understand? I love you so much. Then he starts getting angry. If even that does not work, then in extreme cases, he indulges in violence. He might rape her, he might kill her, he might do any of those things. That happens rarely. But then you do not hurt someone whom you love.
Correct.
So that is where the falsity of this love is exposed. When she's not willing to give him that happiness, he's ready to hurt her. Now, which means that he actually loved himself.
Yes, so he needed love.
So this is the lowest rung of love. But then suppose they do get married. Then they realize that I can't only go on getting something, I also have to give to be able to get. So then it settles down to a certain mechanical routine in which love is based on give and take. Now, this is a higher rung of love. But then they feel that where is that thrill gone? The thrill that we had when we were actually in love as teenagers or as young people. Where is that gone? That has gone because it's on a different level. It's a give and take. And they have realized that. So there is a love in it, but all the same, it doesn't look like, it doesn't have that same thrill. But then suppose there comes a crisis in the family. The husband loses the job, or the wife gets an incurable illness. Then the person says, I've lived with this person for 20 years. I can't abandon him or her. I'll do anything for this person. If the wife has an incurable illness, the husband says, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about money. We can do anything to be able to. We'll take you to the best doctor, to the best hospital. Don't worry about money. I'll see that you get cured. Husband loses the job. The wife says, don't worry. I'll spend less. We'll cut down on budget, we can reduce our requirements. If necessary, I'll sell my ornaments, but you don't worry till you get a job. And even I'm educated, I can start working. I'll try to look for some work and so on. So she supports him. Now, what you can see in these situations is that the person is not focused on what happiness you are getting. The full focus is on what I can give this person. So this is the highest rung of love, which is based on giving, which very often couples graduate into through a situation of crisis. So these are different rungs of love. But all the same, love is a basic principle which has been planted in us as an antidote to the ego, if you look at it. And both are important. Ego is important because without some exclusive attention on myself as an individual, I'll not be able to achieve anything much in life. And it goes a long way in helping me do something substantial in life, including on the spiritual path. Because when a person says that now I want to give a new direction to my life, Even that I comes in. I want to give a new direction. So it's the ego which puts the person on the spiritual path also. So it goes a long way. But at the same time, an unbridled ego can be disastrous, and it is responsible for much of evil in the world. Me first, everybody else later. Scruples and ethics don't matter. So that is the basis of much of evil in the world. Now, that is also not right, and therefore nature has planted the antidote. Just as ego is a dividing principle, love is a uniting principle. Basically, love unites. When a parent loves the child, it is because the parent looks upon the child as an extension of oneself. So there's no division. Therefore, you don't distinguish between the child's needs and the parent's needs. If the child needs care at night, the mother doesn't bother that I will not be able to sleep. She is easily willing to give up her sleep for the sake of the child whom she has to take care of at night because the child is not well. So which need is more important comes first, not whose need it is, because the two are behaving as one unit. So love is a uniting principle, just as ego is a dividing principle. Now, spiritually speaking, that oneness is universal in nature, because we all come from the same source. And therefore, the sense of oneness at the spiritual level which inspires love, and that love is expressed by giving. And because that oneness is universal, love tends to become more and more universal. So that's how love is a principle which is necessary not only for our own spiritual growth, but for making the world a better place to live in. Because the world becomes better by what we give to others.
So you explained really well about love, but I'm still at the same point. I just wanted you to give me some clarity on, because as I see myself, my personal being, my personal experiences, my friends or people that I have observed. So love is like, it demands love also. So giving love may not feel enough many a times. And people, let's say, I feel myself, let's say when I keep giving love, for some time, it has a limit, right? So for some time it may feel good. As you said, there may be different level, but is giving only enough? Will I feel at some point of time कि बहुत तो हो गया, मतलब मुझे भी तो चाहिए? Because anything, like if it has water, so I can give you water till the time I have water. But isn't it gonna get empty? You have to give me some water back to make that balance in both the cups. Does it not work like that in the case
exactly,
of love?
it's a process. One may say that the lowest rung with which sometimes people start as young people when they are fall in love is based on getting. Then it's give and take. And then it could be that, okay, I understand giving is more important and than getting. So it's mainly maybe giving, but still, as you said just now, मुझे भी कुछ तो चाहिए. Means some expectations stay. Expectations of being reciprocated, getting something back in return. So those expectations still stay. Even from children, we sometimes expect that when the child is grown up, then the child will look after us.
Yes, exactly.
That's also an expectation.
Yes, it is an expectation.
That the child will look after us in old age. So that's also an expectation.
And that is why the conflict comes later on. In the teenager or when the child grows up, the conflict comes with the parents. Yeah.
But then if the process is continued, then eventually a stage should come. That is the ideal stage when it should be based only on giving. That should be enough to feel that sense of fulfillment from love. Giving should be enough. That is the ultimate stage. But then, as you said, while the process is going on, both giving and receiving love are important. And in a way, both can contribute to spiritual growth also. Giving, it's easy to understand. If I express my love by giving something, then I'm growing spiritually through it because I'm feeling a sense of oneness with that person. And oneness with even one person is a process that is helping me expand myself, expand my ego circle to include more and more people. So that way it's expanding. So it's an expansion. So giving one can understand. How about receiving love? Receiving love also becomes a source of spiritual growth because that also means transcending the ego. Because sometimes when we reject somebody's love, that also an expression of an ego. मुझे किसी से कुछ नहीं चाहिए. I want nothing from anybody. I can do everything on my own. I'm self-sufficient. I'll take no help from anybody. Now, that type of expressions are also an expression of the ego. So when you agree to receive love, that also it means one is transcending that ego of being self-sufficient, self-reliant. One is overcoming that ego and acknowledging an interdependence, which means that we are transcending the ego. So receiving love and giving love, both are important in life. They are helping both the giver and the receiver of love. Both are being helped.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we were talking about the catchy title of your book. Another book which I found is very interesting titled, Can You Kiss Your Own Face? This is a children book, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to explain a little bit about this story. So this is for children of what age?
It's around 3 to 6 years of age.
And what is this story about? This is a story, right?
Yes, this story was inspired by how children behave at the age of about 3. That is the age, when they want to do everything on their own. They are clumsy. If they start eating, they'll drop a lot of food. If they write, they'll probably scratch the paper with the pencil and tear the paper. I mean, they are clumsy and messy about everything. But at the same time, they want to do everything on their own.
Yes, yes.
Where the parents are always trying to help them because they feel that is how the child can be taught how to do these things properly, and also it will avoid a lot of wastage of time. Take much less time if I feed the child than if I let the child eat on his own. The child will eat so slowly, will make a mess, and then that mess will have to be cleaned up and so on and so forth. So parents have their reasons. But at the same time, it is primarily by doing that the children learn. So that independence has to be fostered. But all the same, this book was inspired by the fact that the children also probably have to learn that we live in an interdependent world, as we were talking a few minutes back, that we live in an interdependent world, that also the children should learn. So that is what inspired this book. And I started thinking, what is it that the child doesn't say that I'll do it on my own? If you tell the child, I'll help you in eating, the child says, no, I'll eat on my own. If you tell the child, I'll help you climb the stairs, the child says, I'll do it on my own. Tell the child, I'll help you take a bath, I'll do it on my own. What is it that the child doesn't say that I can do on my own? I realize when you kiss a child, the child doesn't say that I can do it on my own. You can't kiss your own face.
Yes.
So that's how this book goes on with many examples of where the child is saying that I'll do it on my own whenever the child is being offered help by the parent. But then finally, when the child's mother says, may I kiss you? The child doesn't say, I'll do it on my own.
Yeah. We may be dependent, but we are also independent. Yeah.
And not only that, when the mother kisses the child is happy, the mother is also happy. And then the child gives the kiss back. That again makes both the child and the mother happy. Which means that giving love and receiving love,
what we were talking about. Yes.
Both are important. Both are a source of joy as well as spiritual growth.
Okay. So I just have last question about the ashram. So the Shri Aurobindo ashram has one branch even in Delhi, right? When we think of ashram, as maybe I or maybe most people of my age, they think ashrams are only for old people. So we usually see old people who are retired, they just want to seek some peace, they go to ashram. Is it like that? Or this is one question. And if who should go to ashram? What does ashram really offers? And how does it help? And then we talk about how to connect with the ashram.
This idea that ashram is something like an old age home developed over the last 1,000 years or so, and somehow this idea refuses to go away. It was not always so. In Vedic times, the ashram meant a place where a guru stayed with his disciples, and the disciples stayed like a family. They were a part of the family. So that was an ashram. But then gradually the picture of the ashram changed. They became places where old people could go and spend the evening of their life. Life was inexpensive and peaceful. They could spend the day on ritualistic worship, etc., and have towards the end of life peace and that freedom from responsibilities. So that is the way ashrams came to be looked upon. But then there is a certain importance in having the type of ashram which was there in the earlier times. And Sri Aurobindo and the mother were pioneers in creating that type of an ashram in Pondicherry. And in fact, it was not, the ashram was not an end in itself, it was a means to a higher end. The higher end was that just as the ashrams came to be looked upon as old age homes, spirituality came to be looked upon as something otherworldly, which was meant for a select few. And the select few renounced the world, went away to the Himalayas or to a cave, and pursued God to discover God or some such thing. They went and did that. Now, So spirituality was considered something for only a select few who renounced the world. The rest of the people felt that we know that maybe a nice thing to do what these people are doing, these select few are doing, but it is not for us. We have been trapped into worldly life, and there are so many obligations, compulsions, and conflicts, and temptations, and responsibilities in the world. How can we lead a spiritual life? So they developed gradually over the last 1,000 years a dichotomy between worldly life and spiritual life. That led to a degeneration of worldly life. And that is why it was important to once again bring spirituality into everyday life.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things in which Sri Aurobindo and the mothers were pioneers in bringing back this idea that we should bring back spirituality into everyday life in everything that we do. Because when we bring that spiritual element into everything that we do, it will make us not only happier and healthier as individuals, it will also make the world a much better place to live in.
Absolutely.
By bringing in the importance of doing the right thing rather than what is tempting, following the right path rather than the easy and tempting path. So that is what will happen if spirituality is brought into worldly life. But then since it had not happened for nearly 1,000 years, it had not happened. I won't say it had not happened, but gradually this idea had developed over 1,000 years. It needed an experiment. Can that ideal of bringing spirituality into worldly life the way it was in the Vedic times, can it be also practiced in the modern world? So the ashram at Pondicherry became a sort of an experiment to see whether it can be done. And you can see that there were broad similarities between the ashram which developed in Pondicherry and the Vedic ashrams, in the sense that the gurus, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, were living in the ashram. There were a large number of disciples staying there and with them like a family. And the ashram started developing various activities which were considered normally a part of the outside world, like particularly education and healthcare. But many other things also, like handicrafts and textiles and embroidery and so on and so forth. So many things started, making agarbattis. All those units survive even today. So all these things started because these are things which normally happened in the outside world. But then they were done with a different attitude. So it became a sort of a different type of an ashram, which was doing this experiment of bringing spirituality into worldly life and had a large number of young people. On the other hand, what was not there in this ashram was a regular routine of ritualistic worship, etc. All that was not there.
Yeah, Auroville is slightly so Pondicherry ashram, and also so entire Auroville is like highly influenced by created by also like mother herself, right? So that is absolutely different. People from across the world, they come and they live there in sustainably. So how was that created, and how is it different from the Delhi's ashram? Because Delhi's ashram looks like more traditional ashram. Is it?
No, the Delhi ashram is also not a traditional ashram, because if you come there, you find that the number of young people is much more than the people my age. And most people my age also are not doing their sadhana through ritualistic worship and spending the day in devotional music and spiritual practices. We are doing work which is more like the work in the outside world, but doing it with a different attitude. So the actual activities and so on may differ in different units, but whether it is Sri Aurobindo Ashram Pondicherry or whether it's the Delhi branch or whether it is Auroville, they are inspired by the same principles of bringing spirituality into worldly life.
So let's say somebody is young, right? Maybe age of like 20, 25 or maybe in their 20s. So when should they visit ashrams, and what should they expect from the ashram? Let's say if they see this podcast and they get to know about Delhi branch, let's say, or maybe Auroville. So why should they go there if you suggest them to go there? And what does ashram really offers?
Well, I mean, first I must say that it's not that one has to live in an ashram to practice a spiritual life.
Yeah. Just like
it can be practiced in the ashram or outside the ashram. The external circumstances are not important. That is the whole idea of bringing spirituality into worldly life. That is, you can live a worldly life outside the ashram and still practice spirituality. So that is the first thing. The second thing is that degree of contact and intimacy with the ashram can differ. if a person comes to the ashram for visiting and makes frequent visits, the person will pick up something from listening to certain things, interacting with some people who can provide some guidance by reading some books which will be available there, and in a subtle way pick up a lot from the atmosphere of the place. So that itself helps in the person in dealing with life in a more meaningful way. But suppose a person wants to make a shift early in life to move into the ashram, then it has to be for the right reasons, not to escape from worldly life, but because the person feels that this is a place where I can grow spiritually faster, better, and more in keeping with my own temperament and inclination. That is what is most important. Because as the Gita says, that one person's swadharma can be different from another person's. So even if somebody else's swadharma is better than mine, it's better to live my own swadharma. So for each person, the individual's dharma is different, depending upon so many things. The individual's talents, weaknesses, inclinations, temperament, passions, and circumstances. All these things put together determine what the right thing or the best thing for that person to do is, whether to live in an ashram or to live outside the ashram. The important thing is to bring spirituality into it. Now, why the ashrams were still are relevant and they have been created, I think one can turn to the mother, what her original vision was for creating ashram along the lines that she did in Pondicherry. And later on, the vision that she gave a shape to birth and development of Auroville. Now, her vision was that there should be at least some places in the world where a person who wants to dedicate himself entirely to a spiritual life, there should be some place in the world where that person can live and live a life which allows him to live that spiritual life without any necessity for physical, where the physical necessities like food, clothing, and shelter are being taken care of. So without having to worry about these everyday needs, the person can give full time to a spiritual life without having to worry about where food, clothing, and shelter will come from. So that was the idea of creating the ashram and developing the ashram.
Yeah. Auroville is like a different world.
Auroville was created as a self-sustaining community, again, where one can generate the resources within rather than have to worry about making a living the way one does in the outside world. And more than that, the oneness of the humanity as a whole should be put into practice. So it was visualized as a place which no country in the world will be able to call its own. It belongs to the entire world. And that's how it developed into an international township.
Yeah. People from many countries, they come and they live there. And again, they are not old people. So I have met a couple of people, they used to work in the big companies in US. They left their company and then settled in Auroville. Those kind of people are there. So it's been wonderful talking to you, sir. Do you want to share anything specific? Last words, if you want to share from your side, or if you want to ask something, and then we close.
Well, I think some of the things which are most important is because one has a tendency to talk about so many things which others are doing or not doing.
Yeah,
that actually is not the crux of spirituality. In fact, the mother said to talk about what others are doing or not doing is wrong. And she goes on to, this is what she calls gossip. That is wrong. And to try and listen to such gossip is wrong. To try to verify such gossip is wrong. To retaliate against such gossip is wrong. The whole thing is a terrible waste of time and brings down the consciousness. So spirituality is essentially about oneself, which means that one tries to live one's own life in a simple way around the divine essence within. And that should color our not only actions but also thoughts and feelings. So far as others are concerned, we can continue to love all of them. One may not like everybody. One has to retain the discrimination between good and evil. So one may not like everyone, but still one can love everyone.
Absolutely.
So
beautiful, sir. Thank you so much for time. And I felt really good having this conversation with you. I'm really hoping that audience who are going to watch this podcast is going to learn a lot and have many clarity about spirituality, health, and education. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.